The American flag fluttered from the porch, pristine and proud, exactly how Eric Vaughn had left it 15 months ago. But the key in his hand didn't fit the lock. Rain slicked his uniform as he jiggled the knob, then knocked hard. Nothing. No answer. No dog barking. No daughter running to the door. Just silence and the eerie creak of wind chimes that had once soothed him to sleep after nightmares from Fallujah. He stepped back, scanned the windows. Dark. The carport was empty. His truck was gone. The flower bed Melissa had begged him to dig was overgrown and wild, like no one had touched it in months. He walked around back, hoping maybe the sliding door was unlocked. It wasn't. Instead, taped to the glass with cheap masking tape was a paper with bold black letters that punched him in the chest. No trespassing. Property under management. Violators will be prosecuted. He blinked at it, heart pounding, confused, adrenaline surging. This was his home. His name was on the deed. His daughter's room was upstairs, pink walls, glow-in-the-dark stars, storybooks with dog-eared corners. He had left everything behind to serve his country, and now it felt like he'd been deployed to a life that no longer existed. His phone buzzed. A text from his bank. Alert. Your checking account has been overdrawn. Current balance, negative $37.84. Eric's breath caught. That account had over $12,000 in it when he left Kuwait. He stood in the rain, clutching his duffel, brain scrambling to make sense of the unraveling reality. He called Melissa. No answer. He called again. Voicemail. He checked Facebook. Her profile was gone, not deactivated, deleted, like she had never existed. He pulled up a locator app linked to Sophie's tablet. A blinking blue dot pinged not in their neighborhood, not even in the city but across the river. In a gated community he couldn't afford on an officer's salary. Eric felt it in his gut then, an instinct honed in war zones and whispered through late-night deployments. Something was very, very wrong, and it had his wife's fingerprints all over it. Chapter 2. The Unraveling. Eric stood under the awning of the neighborhood gas station, soaked to the bone, and staring at the screen of his cracked phone. The blue dot hadn't moved. He checked the address, memorized it, and hailed a rideshare using the last of his military bonus. He didn't know what he was walking into, but whatever it was, it started there. The driver dropped him in front of a sleek, gated complex, lined with electric cars and manicured hedges. It reeked of wealth, the kind that didn't come from a second lieutenant's salary. He buzzed the front gate and waited. No answer. Then, as he turned to walk away, a silver Lexus pulled into the entrance. Eric stepped in front of it. The car honked twice, but didn't stop. He slammed a hand on the hood, forcing the driver to brake. The window rolled down slowly. And there she was. Melissa. Hair lighter, curled like she'd been spending time at salons instead of dealing with deployment. Gold hoops, glossed lips. In the passenger seat sat a man in designer sunglasses, one hand lazily resting on her thigh like he owned her. She blinked at Eric like she'd seen a ghost. Eric stepped closer. Where's Sophie? Melissa's eyes flicked to the man beside her, then back to Eric. She's with my mom, she said, voice flat. You can't just show up here like this. You're scaring people. Scaring people? Eric's fists clenched. What the hell is going on, Mel? Why can't I get into my own house? Why is my bank account empty? The man leaned over. You need to back off, pal. She doesn't want to see you. There's a restraining order coming. I suggest you get a lawyer. Eric turned to Melissa. You drained me, took out loans, cards, in my name. She stepped out of the car, suddenly full of righteous anger. I did what I had to do. You were gone, Eric. Gone for 15 months. I was raising Sophie alone, juggling bills while you played hero. You think medals pay for school and clothes? His voice cracked. You forged my signature." Her eyes narrowed. "Prove it," she said. The car door slammed. The Lexus rolled through the gate as the security arm lifted. Eric stood frozen, stunned by the wave of betrayal that nearly knocked him off his feet. This wasn't just a broken marriage. This was war. Chapter 3. Collateral Damage. Eric found himself in a cheap motel off the highway. He hadn't slept in 36 hours, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. He combed through his online banking history, heart pounding with every unfamiliar transaction. Store purchases he'd never made, cash advances in strange cities, maxed out cards, a second mortgage on the house he bought before Sophie was born, gone, sucked into a void of deceit. He contacted the military legal office. They offered polite apologies, but limited assistance, civil matter. Take it up with a civilian attorney. He couldn't even get access to Sophie. The restraining order, temporary but damaging, cast him as unstable, a danger to his own child. One phone call from Melissa, and his rights had vanished. He stared at the ceiling fan whirring overhead, rage simmering into helplessness. He'd faced IEDs, insurgents, and nights when he didn't know if he'd see morning. But none of that compared to the humiliation of being erased by the woman he'd once trusted with his life. Then came the moment that changed everything. While scrolling through a veterans forum for legal help, he found a post. Vets getting screwed by spouses during deployment? You're not alone. Legal aid for warriors. Free help. Real results. Attached was a number. He dialed. Chapter 4. The Fight Begins. Angela Ramirez didn't look like a lawyer. She wore jeans, boots, and a leather jacket with a Marine Corps patch on the shoulder. Her office sat above a thrift shop in an aging strip mall, flanked by a payday loan place and a Vietnamese nail salon. But when Eric shook her hand, her grip was firm, her eyes sharp, like she'd seen war too, just in a different form. She listened without interruption as Eric laid it all out. The house, the credit cards, the fake loans, the restraining order. Her face stayed neutral until he mentioned the trust fund Sophie's grandmother had left her. Melissa had touched it, maybe even drained it. Angela leaned back, tapped a pen against her notepad, and said 5 words that lit a fire in Eric's chest. "You're not her first victim." She opened a case folder and showed him similar complaints. Veterans whose spouses had legally gutted them during deployment. In each, Brad Kessler's name floated somewhere in the background, sometimes as a business partner, sometimes as a co-signer, always circling the damage like a vulture. Eric stared at the pages. "This is a pattern." Angela nodded. "And if we prove it, we don't just take her down, we expose him too. You ready for that?" Eric didn't hesitate. "Whatever it takes." Chapter 5. Building the Case. The next weeks blurred into long nights and longer days. Eric worked part-time unloading trucks to pay for groceries, while sleeping on a mattress on the floor of a borrowed apartment above a buddy's garage. Angela and her small team dug into the financials, forged signatures, loan applications filed from IP addresses matching Melissa's new condo, security footage showing her at banks when documents were supposedly electronically signed by Eric overseas. They tracked down a notary who admitted, under pressure, that Brad had paid him cash to overlook identity verification. Angela pushed the DA's office to investigate. Slowly, they bit. Meanwhile, Melissa filed for full custody of Sophie, citing Eric's mental instability and financial recklessness. She claimed he was dangerous, that he'd abandoned the family emotionally even before deployment. But Eric had his own evidence, video calls logged weekly, emails to Sophie, money transfers, gift receipts. He even had birthday videos saved, proof he hadn't vanished but had been deliberately shut out. Chapter 6. The Breaking Point. 2 days before the custody hearing, Angela handed Eric a USB drive. "We got it." The audio file made Eric's stomach turn. Melissa's voice, laughing, telling Brad, "Once the trust is gone, we're out. He can have his little war medals. I'll have the beach house." Then Brad replied, "Military guys are too easy. All honor, no clue. Let's bleed him out and move on." Angela had gotten the recording legally, thanks to a tip from one of Brad's disgruntled ex-business partners who agreed to wear a wire in exchange for immunity. Eric listened once, then again. Each time his fury cooled into focus. This wasn't just betrayal, it was strategy. They hadn't just lied, they had hunted him. He looked out the window of Angela's office at the cloudy afternoon, the American flag across the street waving gently. This time, the war was on his turf. Chapter 7. The Showdown. The courtroom was quiet, sterile, pale wood, echoing footsteps, the low hum of a broken ceiling vent. Eric sat at the plaintiff's table, clean-shaven, suit freshly pressed, military ribbons pinned to his chest, not as decoration, but as a reminder. He didn't look at Melissa. She wore a modest navy dress, hair pulled back, face emotionless, like this was just another meeting. Brad wasn't in the room. He'd been subpoenaed but filed for a delay. The coward was hiding behind lawyers and money. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing, called the session to order. Angela stood first. "Your Honor, we intend to prove that my client, Lieutenant Eric Vaughn, was not only the victim of financial fraud, but also of a deliberate and malicious campaign to sever his parental rights under false pretenses. We have sworn affidavits, bank documents, IP logs, and, most crucially, a recorded conversation where the defendant and her co-conspirator admit their scheme to defraud and abandon him." Melissa's attorney objected, tried to block the audio as inadmissible, but the judge allowed it. Angela had done her homework. Chain of custody was tight. When the recording played, the courtroom fell into a thick, stunned silence. Melissa's voice filled the room, cruel and calculating. Brad's laughter chilled the air. Eric didn't flinch. He kept his eyes on the judge. Melissa's attorney asked for a recess. The judge refused. Instead, she leaned forward and said, "Ms. Vaughn, would you like to explain this in your own words?" Melissa blinked, lips parted. It was taken out of context." The judge raised a brow. "Is there a context where conspiring to defraud your husband and drain your daughter's trust fund is appropriate?" No answer. Chapter 8. Justice served. By week's end, the ruling came down like thunder. The judge ordered an immediate freeze on all accounts and assets in Melissa's control. The second mortgage was voided under fraud. The credit cards were reversed. Eric's name was cleared. Custody of Sophie was granted to Eric, with Melissa allowed only supervised visits, pending further investigation. A civil suit followed, and soon Brad Kessler was forced out of his company and brought up on separate charges. Turns out Eric wasn't the only soldier they'd targeted. Angela opened a class-action lawsuit. Melissa, facing criminal fraud charges, accepted a plea deal that included community service, full restitution, and probation. But she didn't escape the fallout. Her friends turned on her. Her social media filled with contempt. The woman who once treated her husband like disposable property was now the face of betrayal in a military town that didn't forget. Chapter 9. Rebuilding. 6 months later, Eric stood in front of a modest rental home, Sophie on his shoulders, her arms wrapped around his head like earmuffs. He grilled hot dogs on a second-hand barbecue, his buddies laughing on the porch behind him. Angela dropped by with a folder. Final paperwork. Everything signed, sealed, free and clear. Eric had a new job with a veterans nonprofit. He spent weekends at his daughter's soccer games, nights reading her stories. The nightmares didn't visit as often. Sometimes he still saw the old house in his dreams, the one where the lock didn't fit. the one Melissa tried to steal from under him. But those memories faded more each day, replaced with better ones, real ones. Because in the end, the battlefield had shifted. But Eric Vaughn had won the war, not with weapons, with truth, with grit, with the unshakable belief that no one gets to rewrite your story without a fight. Thank you for listening. Please take the time to like and subscribe for more drama-filled stories. It means a lot to us.